Thanks everybody for sticking with us through this last speech. I'm going to try to keep it a little energized here, a little participatory perhaps. I'm not going to ask you to get up and shake hands and pass the peace with your neighbors, because I know you've been doing that during all of these breaks. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Participatory Exploration activity, or office as Mike referred to it, that we're looking to stand up here in the FY11 time frame. This is funding that is specifically identified within the ESMD budget line, but the way that we've approached opening up this office and looking at how we're going to stand it up was to do something that was across the agency. Because while we've been doing very, very exceptional participatory activities in education and public outreach within ESMD, I think it's very apparent that there are many, many things that we could benchmark against across the agency. So to get into the program, we are looking to establish this office in FY11, and we identified 3 specific activities that the office should focus on. Specifically, research in new technologies. This is a means to an end. If we have the right technologies out there that can engage the public and can get more and more of the public to work with us, collaborate with us, and make contributions, then that's a very leverageable activity, and we want to be able to pursue that. As many of you who are in the audience know, I am not a techie. In fact, I think I wasn't even a good IT kind of girl a while back. But I'm really good at putting teams together, and I had the opportunity to go across the agency and select personnel to help me identify the process for putting this office together. And initially, I got some very good policy people. I got some very good people who basically have been just the right hands of different organizations across the agency in public affairs, education, and outreach. And we're adding some technology-specific people as we go along. So when we talk about putting research into new technologies and therefore funding these kind of technologies to increase public participation, you guys should be aware that it's the team that's behind me that's going to help define what those technologies are and how we're going to be able to move those ahead into implementation. Secondly, taking into account the approach that I've taken in building the team, we're looking to coordinate across the agency efforts to include participatory exploration into future as well as current missions. This doesn't mean that we're going to be funding current missions before we have authorization through the FY11 budget process to open up this office. This means that there are currently participatory exploration activities that are embedded in many missions across the agency. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to serve as a clearinghouse for identifying, categorizing, and promoting these technologies to future missions. We've taken kind of a systems lifecycle approach to this. If you look at it from a big picture perspective, you've got your formulation phase, you've got your development phase, you've got your operations phase, and then you've got your archival phase for a lot of data that's being produced by missions. And we're looking at it across that holistic life cycle approach to say there are activities that you can do in participatory exploration in all elements of this life cycle. But because the left hand doesn't always know what the right hand is doing, and a mission or an activity at one center isn't necessarily well promoted or even visible at another center, we're looking to kind of be the clearinghouse for that activity within this office. And when you talk about best practices, clearly all of us that have any experience in implementing things have looked at lessons learned from other organizations. So we've done that both with the OpenGov initiative that was implemented through Robbie Shingler and folks across the agency as an Obama initiative. As well as looking at the lessons learned from things such as centennial challenges in the Innovation Partnerships Program. So we're looking to build a team across the agency and serve a need across the agency. If we can go to the next page. Aha. So what is participatory exploration? Well, guess what? I'll let you read the definition. It's the active involvement of individuals in the experience of, as contributors to, and collaborators in NASA's research, science, and discovery activities. It is not education. It is not outreach. It is where we engage with the public And the public can include students and educators. But we're engaging with them and we're bringing them in as partners in some of our activities. I think in the space of time that I've got, I will allow you guys to look back on the web in a very participatory way at these charts that we posted so that you can understand what is in effect our mission statement, and at some very high level, the kind of goals that we've set for this organization. When we talk about developing personal connections with members of the general public, that's where NASA's giving out. You know, we're hooking these people, we're connecting with these people. When we talk about increasing public interest in STEM, that's not just our jobs, it's every parent's job. It's every grandparent's job. It's every person of influence's job in any respect that they have to get kids engaged in STEM. Because the one thing that happens when we have people who pursue interests and therefore careers in STEM, it is an economic driver. That message often gets left behind or is not as clearly articulated as possible, but if you compare what you're doing with somebody in a less technical environment, we're making a pretty good living compared to those people that are doing things in a less technical way. So it is an economic driver, not just for America, but also for the world. And finally, where we can benefit, where NASA benefits, is by leveraging the interests and capabilities of the general public to help us achieve our goals. These are things such as the next page, Kath. So, this is just more detail on the kind of things that we're looking to do. But when we engage with the public, we're going to be leveraging the funding that we have for technologies. So there's a lot of companies in this room that are technology oriented. You're building hardware, you're building subsystems, you're building gadgets, you're building boxes and cards. You're writing software. You're wanting to know, what does PE mean to me? And what PE means to you, I think, is that some of these high-end technologies that I'll identify in just a moment or two are the very things that you all are developing. 1.2 gigabit per second boxes, processing boxes. That's not the highest pass-through in the world, but when you're talking about 3D technologies and you're really doing a lot of high data rates, then you're going to need technologies such as that. In the space of time, we'll keep on going on, but I think the bottom line is that this organization is just going to be kind of the front of the spear. Now, this is a great chart developed by my friend in the third row, Yvonne Clearwater at Ames Research Center. And if you start with the information dissemination element here, that is really the public affairs responsibility. They push out pre-planned data, pre-planned web interactions. When you get to the content interaction, that's actually outreach, where all of us who've been in marketing before kind of do that marketing collateral stuff, and that's just to kind of produce something that you can hand to somebody and maybe get in a first level of engagement with somebody, a first level of conversation. But when you move into that higher level of conversation where you're using social media, that's where we think participatory exploration really is starting, where we're starting to engage and you have more than one communications loop with somebody. When they get what we're doing, they get how they can contribute, then we've stepped into the next level, and finally we get to the point where they can collaborate with us. Is that right? It's there. So we actually identified a set of examples of existing public engagement activities. Again, these run the gamut from public affairs to education and outreach to true participatory activities. And when you look at the kind of things that we do, like the 3D HST IMAX movie, that, you know, I only saw the outtakes. I only got to go to the NASM up in DC and see the outtakes. I haven't yet gone and seen the full movie. But when I looked at the 700 people that were there at that particular event in September of last year, and something floated by, a tether I think it was, and people were looking like they were going to reach out to get it, guess what? We've hooked them. We've engaged with the public at that. When you look at using tools such as crowdsourcing or even human recognition tasks where they do data analysis and identify and count the number of craters on the moon, we're engaging the public. One of my favorite little stories of about 6 weeks ago is that when we first did a very large data dump of LRO data into the planetary data system, within about a week, a researcher at the University of Western Ontario identified a re-establishment of the location of one of the Lunokhod's Russian robots on the moon. And he got to raise his hand and said, I found this thing. And he did it using our data, but we didn't pay him to do it. And so all of a sudden, we've engaged with a member of the general public to go off and do something that may or may not be of great significance, but he got it. He's one of us. And I think the people in the room here, we're all owners of what we're doing here. You know, if you look at the 6 billion people in the world, and I had a discussion with somebody recently, and they said, well, probably about 600 million, or about 10% of the people in the world know there's a NASA. They are aware there's a NASA for something we've done. And that's really good, but that might be all they know. But the 500 people that have been in this room today, guess what? We own it. We are passionate about it, and it is in our lifeblood. And if we can't go out and communicate that effectively in many different means, in using different types of technologies, using different kinds of ethos and mechanisms to grab and hook that next generation, and even some that are in our generation now, then as a society, I think we're missing a bit of history. I promised you I would get to the technologies page. Well, when you look at the kind of technologies that we're currently pursuing to enable participatory exploration, we've got a few. I mean, we've got many. I only listed a couple. Immersive technologies like GigaPan, which we developed for use with Mars, and then was used to identify the 1.8 million people on the National Mall during the President's inaugural on January 20th. That's kind of our technology, that's kind of our software that helped with that. So that's something that, you know, when you start engaging with these folks, they can see themselves in these kind of activities. We're trying to develop a 3D version of that, and again, that'd be very cool, because you get to really grasp people that way. And then we're also obviously trying to define a whole set of data analysis tools that would engage other participants. An example, and Bernie, can I talk about it? Climate? Yeah. Goddard is developing something called Climate at Home. And it's very close to SETI at Home, where the concept is that people's at-rest computers, CPUs, would be utilized to run climate models, to validate climate models, so that we would have a better chance of being out on Chesapeake Bay and knowing which way the wind was going to come from, so we could win at our race. Or not. You guys are a tough audience. Thank you. So when you look at what they're doing at Climate at Home, they are spending some of their own dollars at Goddard to develop this kind of software and immersive experience, so that people can reach out, and there are people out there who want to help us solve these kind of problems. When you look at some of the things on the list of technologies that we're considering pursuing, the top one, optical communications, the smart technique people in my life have told me that this has been kind of the proverbial, every time you think you're about to get there, it moves on further out. I don't think that with the funding in the Participatory Exploration Office that we're going to be able to solve that technological feat ourselves. But we absolutely recognize that achievement of a step function forward in technology for optical communications, which could increase from 10 to 100 times the amount of bandwidth and dramatically decrease the antenna size, power, and mass required, would be a significant enabler to allowing new technologies to fly farther and deeper into space. The one else one that I wanted to mention was I think there's people here at Johnson Space Center in Houston here who are working with the astronauts on developing 3D imagery and 3D immersive training scenarios. Those kinds of things, if we can bring them out to the general public, if we could take that technology, figure out how to push that out into the general public, and how to engage them with that, and by the way, somebody's going to spin it off and make a nice game out of it, I'm sure, then we've really done a pretty good job of taking our technology, grasping that next generation, and moving that technology forward. All right, one of the things that we wanted to look at was, well, you know, I'm a flight hardware kind of girl. Since I left JSC 16 years ago, I've kind of been immersed in the Goddard environment. They actually build hardware. It's kind of cool. You get to take people by and point out that there's this instrument that's going to fly, or there's this 7,000-pound spacecraft that's going to go image the moon. There's a lot of really cool stuff that happens there, but it's not all about hardware. So when you look at these kinds of missions that nominally have been identified to fly in the next decade here, you can see that there's a set of them that are going to be ongoing. whether it's the SOFIA mission, the space station activities, or the ESMD analogs and flight technology demonstration missions and XRPs, X-Scouts. There's a bunch of technologies and missions that are new, and since they're in the early conceptual stage, you have an opportunity from a systems perspective to start really identifying what you want to do with those missions and how you want to engage the public through them. In the 2013-2014 timeframe, it's going to be tough to get anything on those missions in terms of real flight hardware, up to and including, 3D cameras. The trade space is pretty tight right now. A lot of them have pretty specific launch dates. But if you go on out a little bit further, that trade space opens up significantly. And again, using that whole life cycle mentality, we're encouraging both the mission sets within the agency as well as the folks in this room here and out on the web to come to us with some of the ideas of how you want us to engage with you and how you see participatory exploration really being a page turner from the agency's perspective. Finally, because I can do a 30-minute pitch in like 17, we're really looking at opening up this activity. There is so much good work that has been performed across the agency in education, in outreach, and in participatory exploration. For those of you who know me for a while, recognize I don't have a whole real high-end issue with being in charge, and I'm not a control freak, really. Ask my husband, please. And so I hope he's on there. Hi, honey. But reality, it says to me that we do have the opportunity here to kind of coalesce all of these activities and to ensure that through workshops and other vehicles, we're going to open up a website and kind of list everything that we've got there that we think is really good. That we've got the ability to communicate across the agency and infuse some of this coolness to folks that maybe were working in a different area of cool. The bottom line says it all. As everybody has said today, great teams, we want to listen to you. So the time has come for me to be quiet and listen to you all, and I'd like to hear from you either personally, tomorrow through the plenary session that we have, or while we're up here taking your questions in the Q&A that is soon to follow. Thank you very much.